Hello guys, once again I want to welcome you to our class for today, and we want to look at the next group of plants, which is called a spermatophyta. I remember that in my previous class I did mention that the last group of plants is known as the spermatophyta. Spermato, let me look for my marker just a minute. Spermatophyta. All right. So spermato, then phyta. When we say spermatophyta, we are talking about plants that produce seed. This is phyta, meaning plant. Then this is spermato, sperm, meaning seed. So we are talking about the group of plants that sustain the ability to produce seed. Don't forget that we'll be talking about different groups of plants, and I've never mentioned seed before. This is the first time we'll be talking about seed, and that is because all these other groups of plants that we've treated or we mentioned do not produce seed. The schizophyta, the talophyta, the bryophyta, the pteridophyta, they all do not produce seed. It is only the spermatophyta that produce seed. And I've said that word sperm means seed. The phyta means plant. The group of plants that produce seed is now called the spermatophyta. That's that group of plants. Of course, we'll have two different groups, two different subgroups under this group called the spermatophyta. The first one is called the gymnosperm, and the second one is called the angiosperm. The gymnosperm and the angiosperm. We are going to treat these different groups differently, or these two groups differently, because they are not exactly the same. We have lots of differences between the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. Now, when we get to gymnosperm, or when I talk about gymnosperm, the word gymno came from the Greek word gymnos, and it means naked. Then sperm means seed. So gymnosperm talks about the group of spermatophyta that have naked seed. As a matter of fact, some people commonly call gymnosperm as naked seeded plants. Naked seeded plants. Plants whose seeds are naked. And somebody may not ask, what does it mean for the seed of a plant to be naked? When you say that the seed of a plant is naked, it means that that seed or the ovule is not enclosed in an ovary. Now, when I say ovule, the word ovule, this is the part of the female reproductive structure that transforms into a seed. Then the part that transforms into a fruit is the ovary. But don't forget that ovary is not found in gymnosperm. So what they have is ovule. And this ovule, which is housed, of course, in the achegonia, this ovule transforms into a seed but does not have any structure that covers it. It's naked, it's born usually on cones. In the case of angiosperm, you are going to discover that inside, the female reproductive structure will have the stigma, will have the style, will have the ovary. We are going to draw this when we get to angiosperm. Within the ovary, that is where you see the ovule. You see the ovule within the ovary. You can see that in the case of angiosperm, the ovary is now covering the the seed, or the ovule that transforms into a seed. And in some case, or in some textbooks, they will tell you that naked seeded plants are plants whose ovule are not enclosed in a carpel or in a pistil. When we say carpel, we're talking about the female reproductive structure. The stigma, the style, and the ovary makes up the carpel. So some other textbook will now say that the ovules are not enclosed within a pistil. It's still saying the same thing, because a collection of carpel is known as pistil. Carpel. This is the female reproductive part of the flower. Then pistil. So collection of carpel is called pistil. So the seeds of gymnosperms are born on cones. Eh? They do not have structure that covers it like in the case of angiosperm. And like I said, it is the ovule, ovule, that transforms into a seed. Then it is the ovary. It is the ovary that transforms into a fruit. And that fruit serves as a covering to the seed. But this happens only in the case of angiosperms. So we are going into the characteristics of gymnosperm. In the characteristics of gymnosperm, just a minute. In the characteristics of gymnosperms, the first characteristic is the fact that they are heterosporous. They are heterosporous. When you say that the gymnosperm is heterosporous, the question now is, what does it mean? It means that they produce two different kinds of spores. Of course, if you can remember vividly, the time we talked about pteridophyta, we mentioned that the xylotum is homosporous, that lycopodium is homosporous, that equisetum is homosporous. Then coming to Pteropsida, I did mention that while some are homosporous, like the Dryopteris, we also have some members of Pteropsida as a class of Pteridophyta that is also heterosporous. But then, by the time we come into gymnosperm, or by the time we get to gymnosperm, you will now discover that all members of gymnosperms are heterosporous. And what does it mean to be heterosporous? That means they produce different kinds of spores. And in this case, they produce the microspore and the megaspore. The microspore is the male spore, to say the male spore that transforms into the male gametophyte. But it is not called male gametophyte. It is usually called the microgametophyte. In biology or in science generally, when you mention micro is usually referred to the male, whereas mega is usually used to refer to the female. So the microspores transforms or produces the microgametophyte, whereas the megaspore transforms or produces the mega gametophyte. That is the case of gymnosperm, and that is what we mean by the fact that they are heterosporous. That is the first characteristic of gymnosperms. They are heterosporous, producing the microspores and the megaspores. Then the second characteristic of gymnosperms is that they have two seeds, and I've explained this a minute. Let me chop this. They have true. Hope you can see what I'm. Okay. They have true seeds. Gymnosperms have true seeds. Just like angiosperms, they have true seeds. The only difference is that their seeds are naked, unlike the seeds of angiosperms that are covered within the carpel or within the pistil. Then it is also important to note that all members, they are all woody plants. This is the third characteristic. They are all woody plants. Yes, this is an important characteristic of gymnosperms. All members of gymnosperms are woody plants. And when we say woody plant, that means wood can be produced from it. A man called Hutchinson was the one who classified plants generally. And according to him, plants can be classified into two groups. He called the lignosae and the herbaceae. The lignosae are those that are predominantly woody, and the herbaceae are those that are predominantly herbaceous. Lignosae, and herbaceae. So, members of a bryophyta, for instance, can be grouped as herbaceae because they are not woody. Members of pteridophyta can also be grouped as herbaceae because they are not woody. Then these lignosae, are contains the groups that are predominantly woody. And in this case, that is where you see gymnosperm, you see angiosperm. But let me say something. In the case of angiosperms, not all members of angiosperms are woody. There are some members of angiosperms that are also herbaceous in nature. But all members of gymnosperms are woody. Please note this. All members of gymnosperms are woody, but some members of angiosperms are woody, while some are are herbaceous. So being woody or herbaceous is not a criteria to know which one is angiosperm or gymnosperm. The only criteria to use is that the cysts of angiosperms are naked, whereas that of gymno that so yes, the cysts of gymnosperms are naked, whereas the cysts of angiosperms are covered within the carpel or a pistil. The fifth characteristic, their seeds are naked, which is what I've just said now. They have naked seed. They are commonly called naked seeded plant. That is the gymnosperms. Then number six characteristic is that they have active cambial layers that produce abundant secondary xylem and secondary phloem. So this group of plants are equipped with the vascular tissue, and within this vascular tissue they have the xylem and the phloem and active cambial layers that of course help to produce abundant secondary xylem and the secondary phloem. Then another characteristic is number seven. You see the sporophytes are large, autotrophic, and more complex than the gametophyte that is nutritionally dependent on the sporophyte. You know, in the case of bryophyta, we did mention that the sporophyte is dependent on the gametophyte. The gametophyte is the one that is conspicuous and apparent, and the sporophyte is inconspicuous. That means that the gametophyte is large and autotrophic and bigger than the sporophyte. That is for bryophyta. When it comes to the case of gymnosperm, the reverse becomes the case. The sporophyte is large, autotrophic, and larger and bigger than the gametophyte that is now nutritionally dependent on the sporophyte. So in the case of bryophyta, while the sporophyte is dependent on the gametophyte, in the case of gymnosperm, the gametophyte now is nutritionally dependent on the sporophyte. This is important you note it. Then fertilization is through water. The agent of fertilization means we did mention in the case of pteridophyta that water is the agent of fertilization. And the same thing applies in the case of gymnosperm. Water is the main source of fertilization or the agent of fertilization in gymnosperm. It's important you note that. Then another characteristic is the fact that the wood lacks vessels. The wood lacks vessels. When we talk about wood, that is number 9, and wood lacks vessels. When we talk about wood, we are also talking about the xylem. And of course, you know that you only mention the vascular tissue, you are talking about the xylem and the phloem. Now, this xylem is made up of two main classes of two main types of cells or classes of cells, the trachees and the vessels. The trachees and the vessels. So we are now saying that the xylem of gymnosperms lacks vessels, even though it consists of trachees. And this is also similar to that of pteridophyta. The xylem of a pteridophyta also lacks vessels, even though it consists of trachees. So, and this is to show that the xylem of gymnosperm is not as complicated or sophisticated like that of angiosperm, because if you get to the xylem of angiosperm, you see these two cells, both the trachees and the vessels. So these are another important characteristics. Then it also says that sieve cells are less specialized than sieve tube and lack companion cells. So let's take the first. Sieve cells are less specialized than the sieve tube. This is another common characteristic of gymnosperms. Unlike in the case of angiosperms, both the sieve cells and the sieve tubes that form the sieve element are all specialized and perform their functions. But in the case of gymnosperm, the sieve cells are less specialized compared to the sieve tube. Remember, the sieve cells and the sieve tubes are the two types of cells that are found within the phloem. within the phloem tissue, you see these two types of cells. Of course, we also have companion cells that is also attached to the phloem. Now, let's say this. Companion cells are so important. They have a metabolic role they play within the tissue, but most importantly, the primary function of the companion cell is to load and unload sugar within the sieve tubes. Now, when sugar is produced, it has to be loaded and unloaded from the source to the sink, the source where it is produced, then the sink where it is needed. So the function of companion cells is to do this, but companion cells are not found in gymnosperm. Companion cells are not found in gymnosperm. The question now is, since gymnosperms lack companion cells, what then helps in loading of their sugar and in unloading of their sugar? They have another kind of cell that performs a similar function to companion cells, to companion cells, even though they are different structurally. That cell is called the albumin. That cell or those cells are called the albuminous albuminous cells. So these are the cells that take over the function of companion cells in gymnosperms. When by the time we get to angiosperm, now all these things are telling you or are explaining the fact that I've said it before, as plants advance, they get more sophisticated or uh, complicated structure. Or let me use the word sophisticated structure compared to the primitive ones. By the time you get to angiosperm, you discover that all these things we are saying does not exist, lack of this, are not present in angiosperm because angiosperms are more advanced than gymnosperm, whereas gymnosperms are more primitive. Then again, we have the fact that number 11, they bear their eggs in small archegonia. They bear their eggs in small archegonia. So we are still gonna look at this. They bear their eggs in small archegonia. That is also true. That is also true in gymnosperm. The same archegonia that is found in pteridophyta is also found in gymnosperm, and that is where their eggs are located. So that is about the gymnosperm. That is about the gymnosperm. The next thing we want to look at now is what is called the pteridosperm. The pteridosperm. But before we look at the pteridosperm, let's look at the origin of gymnosperm. The origin of gymnosperm. The origin of gymnosperm. Now, fossil records and evidence shows that gymnosperms originated from the most primitive group of pteridophyta that is called the xylophyteals. The xylophyteals. Origin of gymnosperm. So, xylophyteals. Xylophyteals. These are the most primitive group of gymnosperm. Sorry, the most primitive group of pteridophyta, and this is said to be the origin or the group where gymnosperms originated, and this happened within the Devonian era or the Devonian period of the Paleozoic era. These are different. I think I've mentioned. I've talked about this era. This is about 405 million years ago. About 405 million years ago. This is when this organism existed. So gymnosperms are said to originate from this group of pteridophyta called the xylophyteals. The xylophyteals. Okay, having thought about that now, we look at pteridosperm. 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 Some scientists studied this group of plants called pteridosperm and commonly known as a seed fern. Commonly known as the seed fern. This is one of the, the group of organisms that gave a little confusion to scientists because they discovered this plant called pteridosperm and they discovered that this plant has some characteristics of spermatophyta and the characteristics of pteridophyta. And that was why they coined the word pterido. Pterido is coming from pteridophyta. Then sperm is coming from spermatophyta. Why? Because they found out that this plant has sorus or sori. They have a frond with sorus. Remember, when we studied Dryopteris, we talked about the fact that Dryopteris have the leaf-like structure that is called frond, and this frond is equipped with sorus. Sorus is that structure that houses the sporangium. So they found that this plant has sorus and it has frond, but it was wrong for them to call it pteridophyta because they went further to research and now discovered that that same plant, had a seed and even microsporangia, which are characteristics of spermatophyta. And because of that, they have characteristics of spermatophyta and characteristics of pteridophyta. They now called it pteridosperm or the seed fern. Pteridosperm or the seed fern or the seed fern. Okay. The next thing to look at is the classification of gymnosperms. The classification of gymnosperms. Okay, so gymnosperms, this is how gymnosperms are classified. Classification of gymnosperm. The first class is called the Cycadopsida. Under Cycadopsida, you now see a Cycadophyllikeus. This is extinct. B, you have just a minute. Okay, then Benetites. So the spelling Benetites. This is example. This is example. This is extinct also. I'll still talk about it. The C is Pentosi. Pentozilla, just okay, pentozillon, just want to be sure the spellings. This is also extant. Then I have the cycadeus. Example is cycas, and it has a family, the largest family, that is called the Abietaceae. 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 So this is a classification of gymnosperm. We are not done. No. This is just the first class of gymnosperm. Classification of gymnosperm. The first class is called Sarcadopsida. Sarcadopsida. Under the Sarcadopsida, you have many others. The first order is Sarcadophiliceus, and this Sarcadophiliceus is extant. And that is why you hear people say extinct gymnosperms and living gymnosperms. Some gymnosperms are dead, while some are living. A minute. Some gymnosperms are dead, while some are living. Some are alive, while some have gone into extinction. So these ones are, this one is the first class that contains both the living and the extant. So let's take them one after the other. This is Sarcadophiliceus. This one is extant. The example is Luginopteris. Then the second example is Benethiteus, and these are orders. Remember, after class order. The second order is Benethiteus, which is also extant, and the example is Benethite. Then the third one is Pentozularis. Pentozularis. This Pentozularis is also extant, and it has example Pentozillon as an example. Then the next one is Cycadeus. Now, Cycadeus is the largest order in gymnosperm. It's called the Cycadeus, and this largest order has example Cycas. Then Abietaceae is the family. That means that Abietaceae invariably is the largest family in gymnosperm. I hope you are getting the sequence at which we are saying it. So this is the first class. Gymnosperm has how many classes now? I think 3 classes. 3 classes. They have 3 classes. So I've mentioned the first one. Let's go into the second class. The second class of gymnosperm is known as Coniferosida. Coniferosida. This is where you see a coniferous, then you see the codite. This, you see codites as an example. Then example here, you see conifers. Just a minute. Sorry, there's a mistake I made which I want to correct now. Please note this. Cycadeus. Cycadeus is one of the orders in the first class, which is the Cycadopsida. Please, the family for this one is Cycadaceae. The family is Cycadaceae, not Abietaceae. Please note that that's a mistake. The family of Cycadeus, this is the order of the first class Cycadopsida that I mentioned. So this order has a family known as Cycadaceae. The Abietaceae is a family for coniferous. is a family for coniferae, not for cycadales. Please note that. All right, let's go forward. Then another one is jingles. Jingles, where you have example, jingo, jingo biloba. Jingo biloba is a native of China, so you majorly see jingo biloba in China. That's people call it Chinese plant. If you see the leaf is like a fan. It has a leaf just like a fan, just like a hand fan. Mm? We may still look at that when we go forward. So this is also extinct. This is also extinct. Then this codates, yes, codates is extinct. Why this one is living? Why this one is living? So I can't remember what I wrote under Saturdays. Please, I think I mentioned that Saturdays is living. Saturday is living. Then coniferal is living. Then jingo is also living. Jingo is also living. Jingo is also living. Okay. So this is the second class, Coniferopsida. Coniferopsida. This is a class. We have coniferous. We have codicils. Codicils. This should be the sixth order now. This is the seventh order. Jingos. Jingos. So we're now going to the third and the last class, which is called Genetopsida. 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 The under Genetopsida, you see the genetales, which is also living. At the end of the class, at the end of this classification, we will point out the 4 extinct gymnosperms and the 4 living gymnosperms. And when I say extinct gymnosperms, I'm talking about the orders of extinct gymnosperms and the orders of living gymnosperms. So under genetales, we have, let me see if I can clean this. So under genetales, we have 3 different genera. Remember, have I even mentioned the genus? Yes, conifer, the genus. So under genetales as an order, we have Genetaceae as a family. We have Witchaceae as a family. We have Genetaceae, Witchaceae, and Ephridaceae. So these are the 3 families under genetales. Under genetales as an order. Under genetales as order, and under the class Genetopsida. So the class is Genetopsida, the order is genetales, and this genetales has 3 different families: Genetaceae, Witchaceae, and Ephridaceae. Ephridra, I think it's Ephridra. Yes, it's Ephridra, not that. It's Ephridraceae. So this Ephridaceae, that's where you see the genus Genetum. Then that's where you see Welwitschia as a genus. That's where you see Ephridra. ephedra, ephedra as the genus, and of course you can get many species from this. Okay, so let's now list out the four. Just a minute. Okay, so before I list out these four extinct gymnosperms and four living gymnosperms, let me point attention to the correction I made. Please note that Cycadeus has a family called Cycadacea. I've written it before. Then Coniferous now has the family called Abiatacea. And Abiatacea is the largest order in the whole of gymnosperm. So by implication, the Coniferous is also the largest order. Then Abiatacea is the largest family, not Cycadeus. It was a mistake I made and I've corrected it. I've corrected it. So the family of Cycadacea, the family of Coniferous is Abiatacea, and that's the largest. So let's go on. Let's start with the first class I've mentioned. The first class I mentioned Sarcadopsida. So the first order was so let's list extinct gymnosperms. Extinct gymnosperms. So the first one is Cycadophyllikeus. Then we have Benethiteus. We have Pentosileus. Then we have Coditeus. So these ones are known a minute. So these ones are known as what? The extinct gymnosperms. Then let's look at living gymnosperms. Living gymnosperms. So for living gymnosperms, I have the first one as remember Cycadeus. Cycadeus are found under the first class Sarcadopsida. So let's first of all mention it, Cycadeus. All these are exam questions. You have to note them. Then Cycadeus. The second one is Coniferous. Coniferous. The third one is Gingos. Then the fourth one is Gineteus. Cycadeus, Coniferous, Gingos, and Gineteus. So these four are the living gymnosperms. These ones are the extinct gymnosperms. Alright, so remember, in summary, we talked about gymnosperms as a naked-seeded plants, and what makes them different from angiosperm is the fact that their seeds are naked, it's not enclosed within any ovary. Gymnosperms do not have ovary, please note that. They do not have carpel, and by extension, pistil, because pistil is a collection of carpel. What they have is ovule, and it is ovule that transforms into a seed. So mention other characteristics, talked about the origin, that they originated from the group of pteridophyta called the Xylophyteus. Then coming to classification, that they have three classes: Sarcadopsida, Coniferopsida, and Genetopsida. So under the first one, we have both living and the extinct gymnosperms, and I've summarized them. I brought them out so that at a glance you can see which one is living and which one is not living. So this is how far we can go for today. In our next class, We are going to be talking about uh, what again are we going to be looking at? We're going to be looking at fertilization or life cycle of gymnosperm. Life cycle of gymnosperm. We'll be looking at life cycle of gymnosperm, and we may also look at gymnospermic characteristics of genetum, the resemblances of genetum with angiosperms, and similarities between gymnosperms and angiosperms. So that's what we're going to study in our next class. And once we are done with gymnosperm, then we'll go into the study of angiosperm. We are progressing. And once we are done with angiosperm, of course, we'll say bye-bye to plants. We're now going to animals and other topics. So subscribe if you have not done so, and I want to see you in my next class.